Yo, what's up, Noxat fam? Welcome back for another cooking video. What we're gonna be working on today is a Korean dish, and it's something that you guys might have heard of before, but maybe not in the same format that you're used to seeing. And the reason why I say you might have heard of this before is because for a while there were like a bunch of YouTubers that were kind of doing this like food challenge thing, which is to eat the spicy Buldak ramen. But what we're gonna be doing today is gonna be making the actual dish. And just to translate it, Buldak means fire chicken, pur means fire, and tak is chicken. This is gonna be a marinated spicy chicken dish. I haven't tried this dish in a bunch of different places. There's only like one specific place in Chicago that you usually get it, and their version is a grilled version, while a lot of other places, they kind of put it all into a pot. It's kind of like a chicken stew that's been really reduced. But if we're calling it fire chicken, I feel like other than it being really spicy, it also should include some sort of flame. For those of you guys who are looking for a really quick chicken dish that's also spicy, if you like spicy foods, this is definitely a dish for you. All right, so what we're gonna be working with today are gonna be some leg quarters. There's a couple techniques that I'm gonna try for the first time, just for fun and just for experimentation. I think just starting with something that has a little more fat in it will just make it a little bit easier. The first thing I actually wanna do with this, take the skin off. Not because we're not gonna use it, I just really want the skin to shine later on in the dish, and I feel like the way that we can do that is to cook it separately. I'm gonna flip this over here, and what I'm gonna do is take off this skin off of this drum first. We'll flip it over. That's where the knife can come in. And then this part right here where it's kind of hanging on. So look at that. Now we got our deboned thigh and our drum, and then we got this beautiful piece of skin. And again, we're gonna start on the bottom side right here. And now where you see that thigh and that drum joint, kind of feel where that joint is right there. Straight through that cartilage, so let your knife do the work, and if you feel like you're kind of fighting it, move your knife and get it to a different spot. No reason to dull your knife just because you're hitting the wrong spot. All right, so taking off the meat off the bone. So one thing I like to do is I like to take one, just cut like straight from kind of on the knuckle all the way up right here, similar to how you would, French a bone. Cut it just so we can open it up and splay it open a little bit easier. Pretty much just use your hand and peel it off that joint. And that last bit, we got our butterflied drum. All right, so the next thing I want to do is break down this thigh. I'm sure if you guys have eaten a bunch of fried chicken before, you always kind of get this bone right here, and that one bone that sits right on the side right here, so it makes kind of like that L shape, and the center is kind of that nice meaty bite. Bottom, the point, is where that oyster muscle is, and so we definitely want to make sure we get as much of that out as possible. And anytime I try to break down chickens or different parts, I just like to try to break them down in different ways to see if I can find any ways that are more efficient. I'm going to try to do a lot of this with my hands and just use my knife whenever I need to. Very first thing that I want to do is try to take out this oyster muscle right here. That bone that sits underneath it, it kind of has like a scoop to it. Usually with a knife, you're not able to get the entire muscle out intact. I'm going to take my thumb right where you can kind of see, I just poke my thumb through there a little bit and I open it up. I'm just going to run it against the bottom. You can kind of see that oyster muscle just popped out right there. And now I'm just breaking that connection to the thigh and carcass. Wow, this is actually a lot easier than I thought it was gonna be. Okay, so just from using my fingers, I was able to get that oyster meat off. I was able to get all that meat off of that thigh that's still attached to the carcass. Now we just have this one bone that's running across here. I'm gonna lift up all the meat to lay right on top of that bone, almost like French the rest of that thigh meat off of it. All right, so that's it. So we got the entire thigh muscle with that oyster still attached, and if you look, that carcass is pretty clean. All right, so we got our thigh, our deboned drum, and our beautiful piece of skin. You don't have to do all this prep for this. I just wanted to do this more for fun, but I do think it's important for, as you start to cook more things, that you start to understand how these muscles are laid out on the carcass. It'll kind of help you understand how things cook. But am I going to be doing this again next time I do this dish? I don't know. It's a lot of work just to do this. If I'm doing a large portion, definitely not. Even though we are going to be putting this in a marinade, still want to make sure that we season this up just a little bit. I'm not going to see this as super heavy like you've seen me season everything else, but just enough to kind of get it going. And the next thing that we're going to add to this is soju. And we're only going to put a little bit in here. It's just almost enough to kind of get it to be a little bit wet, but we're not drowning it in here. What is soju used for? Everyone has kind of different myths or ideas of what it's made, what it's used for. I've read that other places that they use it as a way to tenderize it. This is what my mom has told me, and maybe that's why I believe it. It is a way to kind of take out certain off flavors. My mom would always say, like, I don't like my chicken tasting too chickeny or my pork being too porky. And I think the other way to describe a certain process that where you do that to kind of take those off flavors is like when you're making a stock and you scrape off all that scum as it starts to boil in the very initial part of it. And I think this process allows you to kind of take off those off kind of chickeny flavors. We're going to put this in the fridge and let it rest as we make the marinade for this, and then we'll come back to this later. All right, now that we got all the chicken kind of all processed and got sitting in that soju and salt, now we're going to be making the marinade. There's going to be a couple ingredients in here that you might not have, but if you have an Asian grocery store around you, I'd definitely go check it out. Or if not, I'm sure you can find stuff on Amazon as well or something like that. All right, so just to start off, we're starting off with some soy sauce. And this is the soy sauce that I'm using. This is the soy sauce that we have at home. Usually with Korean food, this is what we're using. Next is gochujan. It's called gochujang, not gochujang, like I'm sure you hear a lot when you watch like Food Network and things like that. And this is the one that we're using today. Gochugaru, not Gochugaru. So this is the part that's gonna make this spicy. I mean, the gochujang itself is pretty spicy too, but this is where that heat is really coming from. This is something that I've learned the more and more I cook Korean food, is that there are definitely different levels of spice, so and also different types of like coarseness. Next we have rice syrup. I actually have never used this before. While I was researching this, this is an ingredient that I saw in a lot of recipes, and I figured that I give it a shot. Just kind of tasting it, it does taste like honey. You guys can't find this, you know, honey would be a suitable substitute, but it doesn't have that acidic kind of tone at the end that honey does. The next two things we're adding is garlic and ginger. As you can see, this ginger right here, it is pretty smashed down. You know, most people use like salt and the back of a knife. I use a spoon after I chop this up to kind of get this a little bit more smushy. And what I'm looking for is, as I'm kind of pushing down on it, you can see that ginger like liquid coming out. I really like the flavor of ginger in food, like fresh ginger, but I've realized that I don't love it when I can bite into a chunk of it. I think it's a little bit too strong. Chop up your ginger really fine, or you can put it into a processor and just make sure that it's nice and smushy. If you like a little bite of the ginger in there, you can leave it a little more coarse. That's what I'm doing with the garlic. And in the description, I left the amounts that I put in there in terms of grams. If you guys don't have a scale, I would definitely get one, especially if you guys are cooking barbecue and you're cooking things like sausage. It's really nice, and I think it's a little bit better to make things in terms of their weight and not just in cups and tablespoons and stuff like that. All right, guys, so this is what this paste is looking like. All right, now let's go grab that chicken. Here's our chicken that we've been chilling in the fridge, and honestly, it smells super clean. The purpose of that soju is to really take any of those off smells out of the picture, just so that we can get the true essence of the chicken. Next, we're gonna take all of that paste that we created, and we're going to just boom, pop it in there. Let's give this a good mix, and it's smelling pretty good. All right, so that's what it's looking like. We're gonna stick this back in the fridge and let it sit. We're gonna go outside and start the fire. You definitely can do this overnight, and I would probably recommend doing so, because this is not a brine and this is a pretty thick paste. I think an overnight would do really well with this. All right, back in the fridge it goes. All right, so the other stuff that we have to deal with is our skin and also the bones that we have. Just because we did cut it off the bone, I want to be able to use every single part of this to kind of make this a holistic dish. First thing that we want to deal with is the chicken skin. With that, I got this right here. Honestly, I think the main purpose of this is for seaweed, like taking seaweed here and then you fold it over and then you kind of toast it up over a flame. And then Koreans also use it for like dried fish to kind of toast. Dried squid is a big thing that my dad and I like a lot. And we're gonna use this tool basically in the same way, but I want to use it for something that probably most people don't use this for. Instead of rolled out dried squid or fish, we're gonna be using our chicken skin. I want it to get crispy. I don't want that chicken skin to, with all that marinade on there, to burn before the chicken even gets to, you know, get cooked all the way through. I'm just gonna season this just lightly. Then we're going to close this, and then we're gonna also season this side and flip it. We're gonna season this side. I think this is a pretty cool idea and a different way to utilize a different tool, and just to show you guys a different method of cooking that you might not have seen before. Next, for the chicken bones. I think something that will be really cool, and this is something that happens with Korean food sometimes, is that they'll give you a certain dish and then they'll also give you a soup to kind of, if it's spicy food, it's gonna be usually there to cool down that heat. So we have all the bones in here. We have this little knob of ginger, throw that in. We have a green onion, break that in half. And then we'll go with 2 smashed cloves of garlic. A good pinch of salt, and then a good amount of water. That's it. That's all we're doing with this. We're just trying to create a light chicken soup that will hopefully bring you a little bit of relief as you eat this super spicy chicken with this really light chicken broth. We're only really gonna cook this for maybe an hour or so. We're not trying to make this into a super high dense stock or anything like that. So keep it light, keep it loose, and just make it delicious. All right, we got our fire ready to go. This is just gonna be a really nice hot and fast. We want that charred dark spots on there, and it's going to be fairly easy because we got all that sugar from the rice syrup, as well as sugar in the gochujan as well. Look at that. I know that most people, that's not what you're looking for when you're doing chicken, but you know, for something like this, that's what we want. Alright guys, so I just finished that first batch. I just got a couple pieces left for the second batch. The one thing that I will say is make sure you got space over here to pull things off. It's gonna go pretty fast, especially if your fire is really, really hot, cooking over direct heat. If that happens and you're worried about it, you know, getting dark on the outside and burnt and not being cooked all the way through, always have that extra space on the side right there. Don't ever feel like you can't control your cook. Just know what type of things could happen and then kind of have a backup plan. Couldn't help it. I took a bite of this oyster meat on that thigh. It's really good, guys. Okay, now that we got our chicken right there all pulled off, just resting, this is when we're gonna bring in, boom, our chicken skin. We're gonna flip this pretty often because we don't want it to get burnt on one side. We want it to slowly crisp up on both sides evenly. So here you go. It's my first time ever doing this. Let's see how it goes. Oh yeah, there you go. You can see that color on that skin now. That's what we're looking for. Beautiful. Let's keep it going. Alright guys, so I think that's pretty good. I think that's the best that we're going to get it without it burning. So we're going to take this off. And we're going to chop that up with our the rest of our Buldak. So as this Buldak was resting, you guys can see how much darker it's got. That's the one thing I actually kind of like because it was a little bit lighter than I would like it to be. Yeah, I'm looking at this on camera right now and it just looks like a bunch of just briquettes on my cutting board, but I promise you it's not what it looks like. I'll just show you guys as I just slice in this first part right here. It's got a nice char on the outside, but it is nice and cooked all the way through on the inside. Plating for this dish is super simple. Oh my goodness, I completely forgot about one part that's not traditional in Buldak, is that skin that we made. Super crispy. And we're gonna toss that in with our Buldak. Couple garnishes that we're looking for is a little bit of sesame seed throughout, finishing it off with a little bit of green onion. For me, this is what I'm looking for in the Buldak, but I feel like for the internet and for everybody else, they're looking for one more thing: mozzarella cheese. And personally, I don't want to do this because for whatever reason, Korea has been putting mozzarella cheese on all their stuff. Beef short ribs, put it over their tteokbokki. I don't know why, but this is what they do. And this is what the internet likes. And if I want to be a YouTuber, unfortunately, this is what I do. Alright guys, so we have our Buldak, our cheese. Buldak also have that broth that we made earlier. But yeah, let's just take a sip of the soup real quick. So good. Let's go with this Buldak. And then a little bit of that chicken skin. Oh man. It has a hint of spice. It is sweet. It is caramelized because all the sugars that are in the marinade. The texture of the chicken is nice because it's crunchy because all those sugars have not, I wouldn't even say caramelized. They are burnt for sure, but that burnt sugar flavor is really important for this. And I think the scallions and the sesame seeds on top just give it a little nice little pop of something else that I think is really important. I would say overall, this dish is, I would say it's a huge success. To be very honest, my spice tolerance is significantly lower than it used to be. And this is not spicy at all. I mean, it's very flavorful. I feel like this is a very pleasing level of spice. With the name of the dish being Buldak, I would definitely make this a lot spicier. I had my mom take a bite of this earlier and she said that the type of Gochugaru that we had was probably not the Gochugaru that is the best for this dish, where we want it to be super spicy. I would say the one thing that I would want to change specifically for this paste that we made for it, I would want to include another liquid or something to dilute the paste a little bit more. Not to dilute the flavor, but I would want it to be a little bit more liquid so that the marinade itself wasn't super sticky. The one thing that I was hoping that was gonna happen as we had this chicken marinating, as it pulls out some of the liquid from the chicken, liquid that was left inside of the bowl, that would be enough to kind of make it into a sauce that we can kind of paint it over the Buldak again, or honestly even to double the amount of the paste and then maybe dilute it with a little bit of chicken stock, maybe making sure that we put a little bit more soy sauce in there so it doesn't taste super bland. I think that would be the way that we go about it. I mean, this is me just being super picky, but I think this is really delicious, and I'm hoping that a dish like this is just a great introduction for those of you guys who maybe have never really had Korean food before or gone to a Korean bar. This be a dish, or other dishes be an introduction to a different culture that you might not know that much about. Stuff like that is a great introduction for you to meet other cultures halfway. If you're planning on being someone who is part of the barbecue culture, who's trying to push this stuff forward, it's really important for all of us to start to meet each other halfway. And I always felt like food is always one of those really easy and super fun bridges that we can use to cross the other side of places that we've never been to before. That's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys liked it, please make sure to like, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next one.